Hello, my friends on YouTube. Today is Sunday, the 27th of October 2024. Today's video, I wanted to do it for a while, however, because of the situation and what's happening in the Middle East, I put it aside for a while. However, some news agencies spoke of it, but not enough, because this is a very important subject, and I'd like to speak about it. And as usual, without saying, my videos are for grown-up only adults, only mature audience, because we speak about fighting, invasion, and that includes war and people get killed. So if somebody is killed, we speak about that. If somebody is captured as a slave and taken as a sex slave, we speak about that sometimes. So be careful. If there are children in the room, please send them away. Somebody underage. Today's video is about, the title is Islam and the exemplary nature, of course, of the Prophet of Allah, may the blessing of Allah be upon him. Aisha, the youngest bride that the Prophet of Allah married her when she was 6 and consummated the marriage with her when she was 9, narrated that some people asked her what was like the moral standard or the exemplary standard of the Prophet of Allah. So she said his life, or his substantiated Quran. That would be probably the most appropriate explanation of her answer. He substantiated Quran. And also there is, I'm going to put the hadith in the description box, but also there is a Quranic verse in a chapter called An-Nur, verse 3. I think it's chapter 68. Anyway, I'm going to put it in the description box. In Arabic it says إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. What it means is like you are on the highest level of exemplary morality. And Aisha, she said he was like the substantiation of Quran, the word of Allah walking, substantiated God, or I'm sorry, not God, but Quran is the word of Allah, so he substantiated the word of Allah. He became like a Quran walking. So we will have to examine that Quran, the substantiation of that Quran. Was it good substantiation or not? So sometimes I'm going to speak like, how do you say? I don't have to say the thing out loud because I don't want to get another strike. So you have to understand what I mean. Okay. There is a situation that it happened on, and some media station spoke of it, but as I said, not enough. And that situation is, it happened in Gaza. The Israeli soldiers managed to free a young lady who is 21 years old. She's a Yazidi woman, 21 years old, whom she was captured by ISIS fighter in Syria in 2014. She was 10 years old at this time, a child. she was taken as captive. And she became a property of one of the mujahideen. Mujahideen, those ISIS fighters, took this young girl from her family, in Syria. They controlled a huge swath of land in Iraq and in Syria. And many people fell in their hands. Some of them are men were killed, women were taken captive. And when you read history, the founder of this ideology, when he came 1400 years ago, we know the stories specifically of the people whom he had beef with, such as the Jews. So there were few tribes, Jewish tribes in Arabia back then, and when the tribes were invaded, similar to 2014 when ISIS invaded certain areas and these people were not following the nonsense that came 1400 years ago, the men were slaughtered, the women were divided in the army, and the most beautiful were given to the main boy. You understand who is the main boy? The boss. The head of the gang. The boss. Okay. I spoke quite a bit about Safiya bint Huyay, Rihana and Guwayriya. These three young women were of Jewish descent, living in Arabia back then, and they were all taken captive. And despite the hate and the anger and the resentment between the two groups, they really hated each other. Specifically, one side really hated the other. You have to figure out who hated who and who calls for the death of whom, and so on and so forth. I don't want to put it out loud so I don't get a strike again. So, the Prophet of Allah, may the blessing of Allah be upon him, Aisha was asked about the moral standard and the holiness of the Prophet of Allah. She said he substantiated the Quran. And we have that Quranic verse says that he was of the highest moral character, something to that effect. I'll put you the verse in the description box. Now, this young lady who was taken captive by ISIS about 11 years ago, she was 10 and now she's 21. You may ask, this is a child. True. But there is nothing says when you are captive that you have rights. So she was taken captive and they did whatever they did to her. I am very sure she was raped time and again. I'm sure she was sold from one to another. Why? Because that's a tradition. We saw 2014 when ISIS was in charge. They had slave market. And they were selling these young ladies in the market to make money because they took these women as their properties. They took their gold. They can also sell the gold in exchange for dollar or keep it with them. That's money. and they were selling these women. And sometimes you sell the woman for a week or two until you had enough with her, you want another one. You sell her to somebody else and keep working the cycle. So this tradition actually came to us 1400 years ago, because we know that the Prophet of Allah, may the blessing be upon him, he married the mother of believers at the age of 6. I want to stop here for a second and explain something. Anyone, especially people like me from the Middle East region or North Africa, probably even until now, when a young person, man or woman, want to get married, the parents will look for him or her, and they will look among neighbors and people around at work. Like my father could say to his friend, I have my son, he's 23 years old, and I'm looking for a wife for him. And this person will say, you know what, my neighbor, he has his daughter, she's 20 or 21, and hey, let's introduce them, maybe they can agree together, and then they get married. And that's how it works. But before we agree to getting married, I have to see her, and she has to see me. We have to observe each other, how we carry ourselves, if we are compatible, if we accept each other. And of course, I have to accept how she looks like. I have to see that I'm comfortable to sleep next to this woman every day, every night. And I'm comfortable to have that's marriage. You have to create a family, you have to have sexual relationship with your spouse. So the woman may conceive. So in a way, sexually, I have to be kind of like attracted, feeling, I am attracted to her physically, that I can have that sexual relationship with her. And now I go back and I ask myself, when you look at a 6-year-old child, and that's when the Prophet of Allah, may the blessing of Allah be upon him, he married her at the age of 6, but he saw her before that. And something must have worked itself inside, got him, things moved. I don't know how old was she when he saw her first, that he desired her. But he married her, according to her own narration, at the age of 6. And he consummated the marriage at the age when she was 9 years old, and he was 54 years old. That's in the hadith. Aisha said that. The Prophet of Allah married me, I was 6, and he consummated the marriage at the age of 9, and he was 54 years old. So, what happens when the mother of believers marry at the age of, or consummate the marriage at the age of 9? When you find a captive girl at the age of 10, you will say, wow, she's so late. Bring her over. Let's enjoy. And I put myself in the shoes of her father and her mother. Any woman will kind of like try to imagine how she would feel if her daughter taken at the age of 10 by these barbarians. knowing what they do to young girls. You will live a nightmare every single moment in your life from this moment on. A nightmare. Death is actually better. Death, I would prefer to die than imagining that these animals doing that to my child. However, this happened 1400 years ago from the boss, his followers, too. They did that. They even did that to each other when they had dispute with one another. Leave that for later. Anyway, a Shiite may come here and feel self-righteous, Muslim Shiite, and say, yeah, this is Aisha. We call her a whore. Ahira. We call her the whore. Wait a moment here. Don't you know that, okay, let me put it this way. If I'm married to a whore, what would that make me? The thing is, the Muslim Shia, in one breath they say Aisha was a whore, and then they say, but the Prophet of Allah, the highest human walked, the most holy human walked the earth. And they start to speak about him and tell you how holy and how wonderful he was. Wait a minute. Even in the Quran, there is a Quranic verse, I'm going to put it in the description box. It says that the adulterer to the adulteress, and the adulteress will marry an adulterer. So in a way, it's saying birds of a feather flock together, or match them together rather. Match them together. So if Aisha is a whore, you're calling her a whore, I'm sorry, but what would that make her husband? I mean, why a good person marry a whore? Do you know what you're saying? And for the Sunni, don't get, so I'm not saying that to protect you. No, because it's the same boat. Aisha, to take revenge on what happened to her when she was 9. You know what she did after the death of the Prophet? Do you know that hadith that speaks of giving the breast milk to an adult man, a grown-up man? She didn't do it herself because she never had kids. She never conceived. So she never had milk. So what she did, she commanded her sister and the wives of her brothers and their daughters to do that for her. They used to strip naked, give their breast to a grown-up man, so he becomes part of the immediate family, a brother or a nephew or a niece, so he can be in a secluded area with the mother of believers. The Sunni call her the mother of believers. What if she had a child herself? I mean, when the Prophet, may the blessing of Allah be upon him, died, she was 18. Let's say many women conceive at 16, 17. What if she had conceived and she had milk? She was nursing her baby. And she didn't need to command. Because that was not a suggestion, by the way. That's very different the way it's written. Because you could suggest to somebody to do something for you, but you don't. When you command, it's written. Command her sister and the wives of her brothers to do that for the men that whom she liked. After the death of the Prophet, may the blessing of Allah be upon him, she inherited everything and she managed everything, so nobody could tell her no. So she used to command. And then once the nurse with her sister or the wives of her brothers, they go to see her and lock the door. So that they can talk about faith and all kind of stuff, you know. I spoke about that before. They used to exchange faith while the door is locked, alone. So, the whole structure, it is sick. And you know, for those who criticize me and say, oh, why you do that? Why you're angry at Islam? Or you have some problem with... Yes, I do. I do. I have a big problem with Islam as an ideology. I have no problem with the Muslims, by the way. You take it personally, I'm sorry, that's your problem. But what do you do if you have an injury, that you have a cut, and that cut is open, infected, and it stinks? Covering it with a dirty rag will not change anything. It actually will make it more infected, more sick, and soon you will have blood poison and you will die. I suggest many of us are doing that, those who came out of this nonsense, we're actually opening this wound. It needs to be cleansed. So wash it well, put antiseptic, clean it, and keep it clean until it heals. Yes, people will see that it was infected and dirty and it's a process of healing. And there's no way around it. You try to cover what's in this book and what happened in the past, it's impossible, especially now. So, for those who know about Aisha, whether you are Sunni or Shiite, it doesn't matter. Okay? If you know of the Prophet, what happens today happened before. However, today, the Israeli soldier, if I see this man who managed to extract this young girl, this young lady, the Yazidi young lady, I'll kiss not his hand, but his shoes for bringing this young lady back to her home, to her family. You see the difference between the Israeli that in the book, it says, it describes them as dogs, rats, descendant of monkeys, and so on and so forth. Donkeys carrying books without knowing its value. You describe them as they are subhuman. Okay, that subhuman, when he had a chance, I mean, if these people were as you describe them in this filthy book, they should at least do the same thing you did to them for 1400 years. But when he saw this young lady, they arranged for her to go back to her family. Actually, she's from Iraq, I'm sorry. But I mean the whole region, Syria and Iraq, was under ISIS. Okay. They send her back to her family. These people, whom you call them rats and dogs and animals, showed dignity, showed humanity way above the best of you who came 1400 years ago. Thank you very much. We hope to hear from you.